be aware that whoever's cameras are on show up on the top usually. So, okay, we'll go ahead and I think we'll go ahead and get started. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I'd like to welcome everybody back for this third webinar about the all-night vigil service run through by the OCA Department of Liturgical Music. And today we're going to be discussing Matins, which is for some people the scariest service to try to figure out or try to put together or to direct or sing or even to serve for clergy. Very often in some churches, the only time we ever see Matins is during Holy Week. And of course, those are very different services. Those are half of them are Lenten Matins, and the other ones are very, very, very different. The 12 Gospels Matins or the Lamentations. Those are not normal Matins service or Paschal Matins. So for those of us who don't get to experience what normal Matins is like outside of Holy Week, really, hopefully this will give you some guides and things to help you with that service. As to quote Father Herman from St. Tikhon's in his liturgics videos that he made on YouTube with Matins, he says, welcome to the Matins lecture. It's about to get real, because Matins is kind of a, for some people it's a kind of a scary service to kind of put together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and when that happens, I will lose video and everything for everybody in the chat. So just be patient. I'll check in every couple of slides to see if there's anything going on. All right. Okay. Oh, sorry, wrong button. I do that every time. Okay. So once again, this is brought to you by the OCA Department of Liturgical Music and Translations, which provides liturgical music, texts, rubrics, everything, or a lot of what you need. We will talk today about how they're still working on the Matins portions of the website, but some of the stuff is available, and we'll take a look at that here pretty much right from the beginning. But do be encouraged to use the OCA Liturgical Music page. They are adding stuff all the time. We are discussing adding more rubrics every day, and Reader Philip and Dr. Vladimir Morrison, who are in charge of the OCA music program, are doing quite a bit of work, offering more classes and things like that too. So let's take a look real quick, just to kind of start and look around the website and see what they have, for Matins. So I've linked here to the rubrics page, which we've looked at in the other two sessions a little bit. One of the things that you might find really helpful is under the Orologian link, they actually do have both daily Matins, but also an all-night vigil document. And this is basically the whole text of the vigil that you would need from the reader's standpoint. And they always have the caveat that these texts are kind of general OCA use, but a lot of them are based on the new St. Tikhon's Hieroticon. So there are certain places where things like Prokimenons and things like that will match the new Hieroticon if that's what your clergy are using. But you've got the whole text of the vigil here that you would need as the reader or choir director when figuring out the service there and kind of putting that together. So that's something that's available for you. Do something here so I can see. And go back. They've got also on the rubrics page, when it comes to the outlines, they don't have any outlines up for Matins yet besides the Kathisma readings, but we are, again, working on that. If you don't have a Psalter that has the Kathisma chart in it, they do have that here that tells you which readings are assigned for which day at Matins, because it does change throughout the year depending on whether it's Lent or not and things like that. So we're about to change our Matins readings soon. But what they do have for Matins is under the outlines for upcoming services for every weekend, they have outlines here that go through the entire vigil service, including Matins. So they give you all the rubrics here for Vespers. So this is for tonight, what you would do at Vespers, and then they actually have all the rubrics for Matins so that you could put a Matins service together if you were going to be doing that and you needed help with that, and the liturgy as well. So that is available for, they try to keep them updated for Sundays that are coming up for the next couple of months. So this goes up through Palm Sunday. They have these orders of the vigils for you. So to kind of encourage people to do vigil if you don't have rubrics already available. There is also, of course, the St. Deacon's book, liturgical book, and there's also other books where you can find that information. Also here on the site, I do want to show under the musical downloads, while they may not have Matins yet, you can see Matins is a non-working link. They do have the Octoakos, and a lot of the things that you might need for Matins are here. So if we wanted to look at tonight for Tome 3, we can see that there's music for Lord I've Cried, and that's just the, or Lord I've Called, that's just the introductory psalms in both Kievan and Obico chant for Vespers. But then they also have the resurrectional stahira, the 7 stahira at Lord I've Cried from the resurrection, the Dogmaticon, the Apostica stahira, the Apostica Theotokian, the resurrectional Troparian and Kontakian, dismissal Theotokian, God is the Lord, or the Lord is God. Many of us are used to God is the Lord, but in the new St. Deacon's Hieronicon, they do give a pretty good explanation of why the Lord is God is a little bit more correct. Number one, it matches the Slavonic word for word almost, but other than that, they kind of talk about why you would do Lord is God instead. And so some people are starting to change that. So they offer both. You've got the Matins Praechimenon in 2 different styles. The canon, which we'll talk about, of course, the praises, the introduction, that's just the introduction to the praises, and the liturgy Praechimenon, all from the Octoakos. For the canon, which we will talk about, they do have the Irmos and the Irmi and what is kind of the accepted, one of the accepted OCA chant versions, which is by Ledkovsky. There's also canon refrains by Yachkov and a couple of other different versions that use similar melodies but different harmonizations. Some of them are Kievan chant, and some of them are what they call Greek chant, which is like a Russian Greek chant. So this is the Kievan chant arranged by Ledkovsky, who was the choir director at St. Vladimir's for many years. And this is his version of the canon Irmos, like for Resurrection Tome 3. So this is what you would sing. So if you don't have those, you can go here to the OCA website and find those. All right. Let me just check in and see if there's anything going on or anybody needs to get in yet. Anybody waiting? Yeah, there's a few people waiting. Let me let them in. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the presentation then. So just like we had last week with Vespers, there's a couple questions you need to ask yourself if you're doing Matins at Vigil. And again, things you need to know are the tone of the week, which again, you can find on the wall calendars or just by keeping up with the tone of the week throughout the year. It restarts with Thomas Sunday and then goes through and changes a little bit of Pentecost, kind of messes it up again. But it does continue on throughout the year from Pascha. And then you've got which feast or saint are we commemorating, what is the rank of the class, and which books do you need. So let's think about tonight a little bit, because tonight's a little bit confusing. We won't go into all the rubrics, but just to think about, when I go set up vigil for tonight, which I have to do, number one, I have to remember it's a we have our Archbishop is visiting, so it's a hierarchical vigil. But number two, the tone of the week, it's tone 3. Which feast is being commemorated? Well, we're in the Triodian, so tonight is the Sunday of the Last Judgment, but we're in the OCA, and it's February 27th tomorrow, which means we also have the celebration of St. Raphael of Brooklyn. So, and in the OCA, the American saints are usually vigil class saints, which we talked about those classes. So there are ways to combine those. So we're going to combine the Last Judgment with St. Raphael tonight and tomorrow. And we'll kind of talk about how that would be done as we go throughout. You really don't lose much from the Triodian, because the Triodian doesn't always have as many verses. Sometimes things are repeated. So we're not going to be losing a lot from there. We're just going to be losing more from the Octoakos, really, and adding in things for St. Raphael. And then we have what books will we need? The Orologian, the Octoacos, the Manan, the Triodian, those kinds of things. Okay, so now we're going to do like we did last week. We're going to go through kind of this complete outline. Let me just check and see if there's anybody waiting to come in. Nope. Okay. So we're going to go through the complete outline now of Matins and Vigil on a Saturday night. And when we send out the video for this session, I'm going to also send out, in addition to this presentation, I'll send out probably 2 different PDFs. One that has outlines of Matins in different forms: daily Matins, doxology Matins, Vigil on Saturday night, and a festal Vigil. So you'll have those outlines because those aren't available yet on the OCA website. They're again working on things like that, but this is a basic outline. So you'll have that, and then also I may send out an outline of what they call the Cathedral Vigil, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit how that works here. But the Cathedral Vigil is something that was developed at St. Vladimir's that kind of contains half of Matins, and you can add that to Vespers, and it maybe takes an hour and 15 minutes or so to do that kind of service on a Saturday night instead of the 2.5 hours that normal Vigil might take. Also, we'll talk a lot about things that you can cut, because Matins is a place where there can be a lot of cuts made to make the service a little bit shorter. So we'll kind of go over where you can make those kinds of cuts. So Matins begins, we're at Vigil, so we've just served Vespers. The priest does not a full dismissal, just a blessing at the end of Vespers. And then we immediately start Matins with the 6 Psalms, read by a reader in the middle of the church. Generally, all the candles are put out at this point in the service. The lampada stay lit, but all candles are blown out for the 6 Psalms, so that it's a nice dark church while the reader reads the 6 Psalms with a lit candle from the middle of the church. That's an option, the blowing out the candles, but it's a kind of a typical thing. It's like in Holy Week, we start Matins with candles not lit too. It's kind of because it's a Matins thing. So after the 6 Psalms, or during the 6 Psalms, halfway through, the priest will come out and read some of his prayers. And then Matins can start one of 2 ways with the 6 Psalms. In the normal tradition, the reader reads the introductory verses, glory to God in the highest, honor, peace, goodwill towards men. But in some traditions, those are sung by the choir, would sing that. It's called like this little doxology. So if you're in a church where that's typically sung, then you can sing it. Rachmaninoff said it to be sung, so why not? But typically the reader just reads that little introductory part there at the beginning of the 6 Psalms. But again, sing it if that's your tradition. Then after the 6 Psalms, the deacon or the priest comes and does the Great Litany, just like at Vespers. Then following the Great Litany, the deacon stays out and does this little back and forth with the choir, and the Lord is God, or God is the Lord. That's going to be sung in the tone of the first troparion that's sung after it. So on a Saturday night, that should be, or Sunday morning, that should be sung in the tone of the week generally, because the resurrectional troparion is the first troparion. But at a festal vigil during the week, if you're doing a vigil during the weekdays, it's in the tone of whatever the first troparion is. So if it's Transfiguration, you sing God is the Lord in tone 7. If it's Dormition, it's in tone 1. If it's for a specific saint, Saint Nicholas, it's in tone 4. So you've got these, whatever tone the first troparion is in, just like Lord I've Cried. That's the tone that you sing God is the Lord is. And it's set to the troparion melody, not the stichier melody. So, if it's tone 1, the Lord is God and hath revealed himself, it's the same as the troparion. So, however you do that, and that's sung back and forth between the choir and the deacon. Then we have the troparia for Matins. It's a little bit different than it is at Vespers. Again, if we're serving Vespers by itself, you do the resurrectional troparion once on Saturday night, glory, and the festal troparion now and ever the dismissal Theotokian. If it's Vigil, you would sing Rejoice, O Virgin Theotokos 3 times, or maybe add in a festal troparion once. At Matins, you sing the resurrectional troparion twice, then glory, then the festal troparion for the day, and then now and ever in the dismissal Theotokian. Normally, for a day like tonight, like the Last Judgment, the Triodian pre-Triodian Sundays don't have a troparion for the day, so it's just resurrectional troparion twice, dismissal Theotokian. But again, tonight we will insert St. Raphael of Brooklyn in there into the middle. because it's a North American feast. So then after the dismissal Theotokion, which is, again, typically in the tone of the Troparion that precedes it, some people might sing it in the tone of the Troparion, the Resurrectional Troparion, or the tone of the week, just so that you get to hear all of them every week. That practice varies, but rubrically it does say the one that precedes it. So after the Troparia, we have the first reading from the Kathisma. At Matins, there are 2 full Kathismas appointed. Not very common to see in parish practice. You may see it in a monastery, but generally there's some kind of variations on this Kathisma reading. But if you see the outline here, we have the reader reads the full second Kathisma, and then there's a little litany, and then there's the first set of Kathisma hymns. Then the reader reads the full third Kathisma, little litany, Kathisma hymns. All kinds of variations on this. You can do just one of the Kathisma readings and do it in full. You can do one stasis of Kathisma. You can do one stasis of each Kathisma. You can do one psalm from each one, or whatever. Or you can just skip it entirely, which is what a lot of churches do. And in the Cathedral Vigil, would start with God is the Lord and go straight sometimes to the Polyeleos and skip these Kathismas altogether. So do the Troparion and then skip. So there's lots of variations here. What we do at my parish, just as an example, is we do one stasis total, and we alternate it each week. So one week it's the first stasis of the second Kathisma. The next week it's the second stasis of the second Kathisma, and we go through all 6 over the course of 6 weeks, and we just alternate them. But we just do one stasis, then the little litany, and then just one set of the Kathisma hymns. The Autokos has 2 sets of Kathisma hymns. Each one has 3 hymns. We tend to do one set one week, and then the other set the other week, and just alternate them. So again, there's lots of variations. If it's a festal vigil, there are 2 sets of Kathisma hymns in the Manaean that you would use. And if you're only doing one Kathisma reading, the general order is to take the first Kathisma hymn from each set, as opposed to just doing one set. You do the first one, Glory Now and Ever, and then the first one from the second set also for the Kathisma hymns. So Kathisma hymns themselves can either be read or sung. If they're sung, you can sing them to the Stachiro tones. But a lot of churches, and in Rocor especially, they tend to read them and get through them, or again, just skip them all together. So that gets us up to the Kathisma. Let me check on our people, see if anybody's waiting. Yep. Okay, let these people in. And back to the show. Okay. So we got through the Kathisma here. And now we kind of come up to the bigger, one of the big main parts of the service. When it comes to the Cathedral Vigil, a lot of the pieces in the Cathedral Vigil come from this page. Because again, it's a shorter version. It's basically just a lot of the big sung pieces that happen in that service. So next, after the Kathisma hymns, after the second set of Kathisma hymns, the clergy get vested, and they get, or the priests put on their phalonion, at least if the bishop's serving, he gets vested. And they get ready for the Polyeleos. The Polyeleos, typically in American practice, a lot of times, is sung in a lot of churches all year round. It can be sung, pretty much every Sunday. But rubrically, that's not what is appointed. What is appointed for a lot of the year is actually Psalm 118. And when it comes to Psalm 118, that's the entire 17th Kathisma, right? One psalm. There's no really specific ways on how to do it. I remember when my priest asked me years ago to start doing Psalm 118, I said, I don't know how to do that. And I asked around, and I asked people at monasteries, I asked people in Russia, I said, what do you guys do for Psalm 118? And they all said, we've never done it. So what we did was we divided it up in 8 parts, and we sing it in tone 3. But I have seen some different compositions since then, but it's not very commonly done. But the Polyeleos is really only appointed for Sundays from the leave taking of the Exaltation of the Cross, so about September 22nd, 23rd, up through next week, up through Cheese Fair, or the Forgiveness Sunday. And the Polyelean is only sung on those Sundays, or if you are celebrating a Polyelean or Vigil class feast on a Sunday or a weekday. That's the only time the Polyelean is appointed. Any other time, you sing Psalm 118, or some version of it, or read it, or do something, or just skip it, which is what most people do. Or just sing the Polyelean all year round, which is, again, what a lot of people do very commonly. So just know that the Polyelean really is only set aside for a specific time, specific services, but is often sung every week in some churches, or just skipped when it's supposed to not be sung. And Psalm 118 is rarely done. If you're interested in seeing what we do for Psalm 118, send me an email, and I can let you know how we've divided it up. It doesn't add that much time to the service. It takes a couple of minutes to sing through a section of it. So it's not too bad. So after the Polyelean, there are various things that could happen, right? Thinking of tonight specifically, all of these things are going to happen. But like right now, after the Polyelean, for these 3 pre-Lenten Sundays, we sing By the Waters of Babylon. And to get on one of my soapboxes, which forgive me if any of my soapboxes offend anyone, but this is the only places where By the Waters of Babylon is meant to be sung. 3 times at Matins, the 3 Sundays before Lent. It doesn't fit in very well with liturgy, where some people sometimes do it during the clergy communion, but it's a repentant piece. It's not a festal liturgy. Is a festal service, not usually a Lenten service. But at Matins, we sing this By the Waters of Babylon here. So there are different versions that you can do, but it is appointed for these 3 Sundays only. So if you don't come to Matins these 3 weeks, you don't ever hear By the Waters of Babylon, or get to sing it. Or if it's not one of these 3 pre-Lenten Sundays, there might be a magnification. So if it's a Polyelean or Vigil class feast, then we have the magnification here. And even on Sundays, we still do magnifications now. Generally, the magnification is meant for a festal vigil, probably on a weekday with lots of verses and the clergy sense during it. But you do it on Sundays as well if it's appointed. And the way it's done generally is the clergy still come out like they would in a festal vigil. They'll sing the magnification once, and then the choir sings it once, and then moves on to the Evangeliaria, and the clergy begins censing the church. So you don't usually use the verses for the magnification on Sundays, but you do sing it once, or maybe the clergy just sing it once and you move on. There's various practices of that, but it is appointed. So for tonight, because it's a pre-Lenten Sunday and a Vigil class saint for North America, we will do all of this. We'll do the Polyelean, By the Waters of Babylon, and the magnification, and then the Evangeliaria. So all of those things are kind of appointed to be done all at once tonight. And so it's a long section. It's a lot of singing. If you're not used to doing this, for the choir, you sing the Kathisma hymns, you sing the Polyelean, you sing By the Waters of Babylon, you sing the Evangeliaria all in a row straight. So it's quite a bit of singing. So just be prepared for that when you start doing vigils. That these couple of Sundays can get can be a little taxing on the voice. During the Evangeliaria, the clergy will sense the church just like they did at the beginning of vigil, where the deacon leads the priest or the bishop around to do a full, complete sensing. So you want to choose an Evangeliaria that helps get your clergy through the whole church, or at least a tempo that allows them to do so. You don't want to sing it too fast to where they're not back into their place by the end of it. And you don't want to sing it too slow to where they get back and they're standing for another 5 minutes while you're finishing the Evangeliaria. So you want to think about the size of your church. And there are various versions. You can sing it in Byzantine melodies. You can sing it to Kevin chant melodies. There's lots of different versions of the Evangeliaria that can be done. There's a traditional chant, which is the one that a lot of people use for concert settings like Rachmaninoff for Tchaikovsky. So lots of different melodies that can be used there at the Evangeliaria. This is usually followed by a little litany. Now, one of the things that can be skipped or left out at vigils is some of the little litanies. There are 6 if you do all the cathisms, 5 or 6 little litanies just in Matins alone. So to leave some of those out is one place where you can make up some time if you want to leave out some of those little litanies. Plus, if you don't have a deacon, sometimes there are places where it might be hard for the priest to do a little litany during the canon or something, depending on the size of your parish. So you can keep that in mind when you're looking at things to drop, be the little litany. For the cathedral vigil, outside of the Triodian times, generally it's the Polyeleos and the Evangeliaria sung straight after each other, or that's how they are on a normal Sunday as well. The Polyeleos or Psalm 118, then straight into the Evangeliaria, and then followed by the little litany. Now, this next section is one of the ones that is very often abbreviated or skipped altogether or changed out. And that is after the little litany, we have on Sundays or Saturday nights, we have the epokoi, which is a single hymn sung in the tone of the week. And generally, it's easier to sing in the troparion tone, I find. That's how we do it. Or it's read again. Our Rokor brethren have been doing vigil pretty constantly in most of their churches for a long time. And they read a lot of these hymns instead of sing them. So, if that helps, you can have a reader go through and do a lot of these extra hymns that you may not have done before. But the epokoi typically is done here. If it's a festal vigil, there may be other sessional hymns that are appointed here instead of, but on Saturday nights, it's the epokoi from the Octoikos in the tone of the week. Then after that, we have the anabathmoi, which are sometimes also called antiphons. They're also from the Octoikos and sung in the tone of the week, and generally to the stachira tone. So you have the epokoi, the troparion tone, the anabathmoi, and the stachira tone. The anabathmoi are not something that you typically see in parish use very often, but they are what's appointed. There are actually 3 sets of hymns for every tone, except for tone 8, which has 4. But the other tones all have 3 sets, and each set has 3 hymns. The way we do it in our church is we just sing one of those sets. So we'll do the first set for each tone for 8 weeks, then the second set for each tone for 8 weeks, like that. But these are really interesting hymns, and if you, there's some of the only hymns that we have that are for the Holy Spirit. And if you don't get to hear the anabathmoi, there's these really nice little hymns dedicated, some of them to the Holy Spirit, which are really nice. We don't have a lot of those in the church, and this is where they're appointed, is at the anabathmoi and matins. What is normally done in most churches at Vigil is to sing the first set of anabathmoi in tone 4 all the time, and that's From My Youth. Now, this is appointed at festal vigils. At all festal vigils, you sing From My Youth. But on Saturday nights, it really should be the anabathmoi in the tone of the week. But what has become tradition in Russian churches, style churches, is to just sing From My Youth at every vigil all the time. And again, that's a local practice in a lot of places. And if that's your practice, then think about it. But always remember, my question when it comes to liturgics and choir directing is why? Why do we do it? If it's because that's what the priest wants, then okay. If it's because that's what we've always done, is that always a valid reason? If it's because the anabathmoi are too hard, you can just read them or do them in stachira tones. So start asking yourself why, or asking whoever why are we doing these things? But From My Youth is appointed also again at festal vigils. It's a composed piece very often, although technically it is the anabathmoi tone 4. But there are lots of composed versions of From My Youth that can be sung. From My Youth is followed up by the prokimenon. The deacon and the choir do the prokimenon in the tone of the week. They do Let Every Breath Praise the Lord, and sung to the same melody as the prokimenon if you can. If not, you can just do it straight. But you can set it to the same melody as the prokimenon. Then you have the gospel reading read by the priest. Generally at the altar. There are a couple different traditions, Greek style versus Russian style, where the priest stands at the altar. But it should be done facing into the altar, or facing north on the side of the altar, or facing east from the front of the altar. There are those options. It's typically not read turned around, which is the way that a lot of churches do, though, and that's fine. But it is the priest who reads the gospel at matins, or the bishop, not the deacon. The gospel is followed by the choir singing "Having Beheld the Resurrection of Christ," pretty much always every Sunday. After Pascha, it's technically supposed to be done 3 times at every vigil. Again, some people just sing it once. And then this is typically where the cathedral vigil ends. is after having beheld the resurrection of Christ. Then you'll go into the dismissal from that point, and not do anything that comes after it. And this is where things start to get kind of tricky for people, and not everybody's always sure what to do after this point, because this is where the canon comes in. But we're going to go through it, and so don't be too scared. Let me just check in on people and see if anybody's coming in. No, good. And see if there's anything over here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just address some of these questions before we move on. So it's already been answered, but yes. So the first kathisma is done at Vespers on Saturday night. Second and third kathisma are then appointed for Matins. Good, that's already been answered. All right. Cool, let's go back now. Okay. So after the gospel, we have having beheld the resurrection of Christ. Then the reader reads Psalm 50. This is another place where you can make a cut. At my church, we don't typically read Psalm 50 on Saturday nights. It's going to be read in the hours in the morning, and people read it all day, all the time anyway. So it's one place where we kind of change that. But at a festal vigil, it's always read, because you don't read having beheld the resurrection at a weekday vigil. So you go straight into Psalm 50 after the gospel. And a daily matins, Psalm 50 is always read also. But it does come here in between these. So having beheld the resurrection of Christ, Psalm 50. And then you have these kind of post-gospel Sechira. Normally it's like glory through the prayers of the apostles, and now never through the prayers of the Theotokos. You have mercy on me, O God, then Jesus having risen from the dead. Those hymns that come from the Paschal Matins are sung every Saturday night, except for during the Triodian, right? We sing instead, Open to Me the Doors of Repentance, which is another hymn that it has its place. Its place is here at Matins on Saturday night, is when that's supposed to be sung after the gospel reading. It's, again, moving it to Sunday, because you don't do Matins. If you want to do that, I would say do it before the service. I've heard that people do that before, like in between the hours and something like that. But during the liturgy, it's still kind of, to me, is an odd place to put those repentant Lenten hymns. But again, if your priest tells you to do it, then go right ahead. But this is where it belongs, is here after the gospel at Saturday night matins. So we sing Open the Doors of Repentance, for the next, 7 weeks, including tonight still. So, be prepared for that to be inserted if you haven't done it before. And then we have, after Open the Doors of Repentance, the deacon or the priest does the long commemoration prayer, O God save thy people, where they commemorate all the different saints. Choir responds with 12 Lord have mercies. It's taken from, it's the same prayer that's used at Litia. At Litia, if you're doing it fully, that one is followed by 40 Lord have mercies, but at this part in Matins, it's just 12. And kind of the same way you would do it there. So that happens there. And that basically gets us up to the canon, right? So there's quite a bit of information there. And again, that's kind of where the Cathedral Vigil version stops. And then we start the part that seems to be most people's biggest issue area, which is the canon. And we're going to kind of get through it and talk about some different ways to do it. So the canon. The canon is basically a very, very long poem section, right? It's all these various hymns or stanzas from these long, elaborate compositions, by various saints on different themes. The canon is one of the most important parts of any service, I would say, because it's where most of the festal information is, and it's where a lot of the theology is. When you don't hear the canon, you miss a lot of what's part of the festal service. Yes, the Lord I have Christ to hear, I have some things in it about the life of the saint, but the canon really explores those themes quite a bit, and really gets into a lot of things. If you think about something, one of my favorites is the canon for Annunciation. It's a conversation between Archangel Gabriel and the Theotokos, and each hymn, starts with the Archangel said, and the Theotokos replied, and it's all this really great stuff that's in these canon texts that if you don't do them, you kind of miss a lot. If you do Beatitude verses on Sunday mornings, you get some of these hymns from the Manichaean canon, but it's not enough necessarily. So I really encourage people to take these canons and don't be scared of them. There's lots of ways to simplify it, but what I got here is the full version of a canon on Saturday night if it's a simple service. So not how it'll look tonight. We'll talk about variations. Rubrics, as rubrics get posted and things like that, you'll see how the variations are on there for the different canons. Because it does change whether it's a simple service, a doxology, Polyeleos, or Vigil class on the Saturday night. But this is the Saturday night version of a simple service. So we're going to have multiple books, right? You're going to have the Octoicos. You're going to almost always read the Octoicos canon on a Saturday night, unless it's like Palm Sunday. And then you're going to have the Manaean or the Triodian, or maybe both. Tonight we'll use both. Generally, it'll just be on Saturdays, it'll be one or the other. And then there's various hymns that come from that. Now, the traditional musical way to do the canon is that it's sung in its entirety. Everything is sung by two choirs who alternate each troparion or stanza, right? Most of us don't have two choirs. Some churches do, but a lot of people still don't sing every part of the canon. If you want to hear how that's done really well, go to an Athonite monastery where they do it with two choirs and they sing back and forth every troparion. It's really nice. In the Russian tradition, you don't see it happen very much. Very often, it's just a reader who does almost the whole thing, and the choir might sing the Irmi or the Katavasia. In modern Greek churches, you only get the Katavasia at Orthodox, and you don't even get the rest of the canon. So there are lots of variations here. But the full way is that on each ode of the canon, of the 8 odes, no ode 2, of the 8 odes that we do, you read and sing 14 hymns, and then plus the Katavasia that's done. And how that's done is first you have the Irmos, and the Irmos is a hymn that comes from a book called the Irmologion, which is a book we don't really see much anymore. But the Irmos has these hymns for all the different versions that could happen. Irmos, that word means link. It's a hymn that links the Old Testament theme of each ode to the canon, to the feast that you're celebrating. Each ode has a different theme. Ode 1 of almost every canon is about the crossing the Red Sea. Ode 4 is about Habakkuk. Ode 6 is about Jonah and the whale. Ode 7 is I think the 3 used in the furnace, and Ode 9 is the Theotokos and things like that. So they each have these different themes. Ode 2 is the really repentant one, and we don't do that one obviously except during the Great Canon, and it may be appointed other times during Lent for Lenten Matins on weekdays, but we don't use Ode 2 outside of Lent at all. So they have these Old Testament themes that kind of are then tied in, and that Irmos links the theme to the feast. So you sing the Irmos once, at least. Sometimes it may say sing Irmos twice to get to this 14 total, but right now we're just going to look at this version for a simple service. You sing the Irmos, then you sing read 2 of the Troparia for the Resurrection canon. This is in the Octoicos and the Theotokion. These Troparia are preceded by a refrain. The refrains can be hard to figure out sometimes. If you have a copy of the Order of Divine Services book, it has a chart with all the canon refrains that you could possibly do. For the Resurrection, it's "Glory to Thy Holy Resurrection, O Lord." For the Theotokos, it's "Almost all Theotokos save us." Generally, a reader in a lot of churches, a reader just reads those and then they read the Troparia, but they can be sung. And the OCA, where they have the canons, have melodies to sing these to. It's generally, a lot of times, it's the melody of the last measure from the Irmos, then applied over to that. And we sing the refrains at my church. It's really nice, and the reader doesn't have to do so much. So you sing the Irmos, you do these 2 Troparia and the Theotokion for the Resurrection. Then you would have 3 Troparia for the Cross and Resurrection, which is "Glory to Thy precious cross and holy resurrection, O Lord," for that refrain. You have 3 for the Theotokos, "Almost all Theotokos save us." All of those are found in the Octoicos. So if you have the Sunday Octoicos book, all of these hymns are listed in there, and you just read them straight down. Then you would pull 4 Troparia from the Manaean for the saint. Generally, there are only 4 for a simple service. Some feasts will only have 2 or 3 per ode, like especially great feasts, they may have less or more. Sometimes in the Triodian, they may have 6 or 7 Troparia in the Triodian for something. So It'll kind of just depend, and the Triodian ones are done a little bit differently, but again, this is a simple service. Then we have the katabasia. The katabasia, that word means come together. And what that meant was literally the two choirs would come together in the middle of the church to sing this hymn at the end of each ode of the canon. So the katabasia, sometimes it's the earmos again. Sometimes it's the second earmos, maybe for a feast. Sometimes it's the earmos for an upcoming feast or a feast that just happened. Like we were singing the katabasia for the meeting of the Lord for a couple of weeks. Right now, on these Sundays, they're specific. Like tonight, we actually sing the katabasia are going to be the Great Canon Irmi. So the Great Canon of St. Andrew of Crete, those earmos, those Irmi hymns are what we sing tonight as katabasia for the Last Judgment. Last week it was the tone 6 resurrectional earmos that was used as katabasia. So it changes during the Triodian a little bit. And again, there's a chart for that too. In the Order of Divine Services book, there's a katabasia chart for the whole year that tells you which ones you're singing. Except for the Triodian, it just says C Triodian, but sometimes it's not always that helpful. So that's the typical kind of layout. Now, does any parish do 14 troparia usually at the canon? I've never seen it done before. Even in monasteries, sometimes it may not be done. What you would do is you want to kind of come up with a number if you're going to start doing canons on Saturday nights and kind of see what it is that you want to do. At our church, we typically do 7. During the Triodian times, we may kick that up to 8 or even 9, just so we can get all the Triodian hymns in. But typically 7 is like kind of our normal number. And how we do that is we just kind of cut some of the ones from each thing. So we'll do the, and this doesn't include the earmos. This is the earmos plus 7 troparia. So we sing the earmos once, do 2 troparia for the resurrection, 1 for the cross and resurrection, 1 for the Theotokos, and then 3 from the Manaean is what we would do generally. And that gives us 7 troparia. And then we only sing the katabasia after odes 3, 6, and 9, which is a very common way to do it because it basically just gives the deacon a heads up that it's time to come do the little litany. So if you want to leave some stuff out, katabasia or something you can leave out. At a great feast, the katabasia are the same as the earmos, so some people might leave them out, some people might do them again. Kind of just depends. At Pasco, we always do the katabasia too. It's always a little different thing, but that's kind of how that works. So you can decide whatever you want. You can do just the resurrection and the saint. You could do 2 resurrection and 3 for the saint and just do 5, or do 2 and 2, make it 4. However you want to work out with your priest. Like, let's do the canon, but let's, obviously we're not gonna do the whole thing. How can we divide that down? But we found that doing 2, 1, 1, and 3 for this simple kind of service works pretty well. If it's a doxology service, you might leave out the cross and resurrection and do resurrection Theotokos saint. If it's a Polyeleos or Vigil class, you leave out those and you just do resurrection and the Manaean and resurrection and saint. For tonight, it will be probably 2 at our church. We'll do 2 from the resurrection, probably 3 or 4 from the Triodian, and then 3 or maybe 4 for the Manaean. I have to find out kind of how we're going to do that. So we may do upwards of 10. It just depends because it is a Vigil class saint and the Last Judgment all at the same time. And it kind of just depends, but that's how that's done. And again, you can sing those refrains, you can have the reader read them, you can have a different reader read them. That's another way you can do it. One reader reads the refrains, another one does the troparia, however you want to do that. Or you can work up to eventually singing all of it. Not very common, but it could be done. So that's kind of the basic breakdown. So you're going to have multiple books, right? You're going to go from the Octoicos to the Manaean, maybe, or the Triodian, and the reader's going to have to read between 2 or 3 different books. And that's kind of very typical. That's how it's done for the canon. Now, after the 3rd ode of the canon, there's typically a little litany. Again, I know churches that leave these out. Very often they'll have, just again for time, they'll just go straight through, kind of like you would at Compline. If you're doing a canon at Compline, there's no litanies. So you could do the same thing. You just leave out the little litany and go straight to the hymns that come after it. But generally there is a little litany that happens there. Again, if you only have one priest and there's a lot of people and he's still doing the anointing of people at Vigil, and the 3rd ode comes, he can't do the little litany maybe, or he can't, or whatever. So just keep in mind that, little litanies are something that some people do skip, but they are there. So after that, we have the generally on a Saturday night, if it's a simple service, you'll have the Kontakion and the Ekos for the Saint from the Manaean. But it's going to be in the Manaean, it's going to come after Ode 6, but when you sing it at Vigil, it's going to come after Ode 3. Because if it was a weekday, you would do it after Ode 6, but on Saturday night, it gets bumped to Ode 3. So the Kontakion and the Ekos for the Saint of the Day generally goes after Ode 3. There may be sessional hymns that are in the Manaean after Ode 3. You can do those or not. At my church, we typically skip them. So again, that's another thing you can just kind of skip, or you can just read them, or you can sing them however you want. Lots of options. Then again, after Ode 6, there's another little litany, and that's followed by the Kontakion and the Ekos from the Octoikos. So that is after Ode 6 and the Octoikos. Again, for simple service, this is how it's done. There are some Sundays where these flip, and it'll tell you in the service or the Manaean, like if it's one of the Sundays for like the ecumenical councils or those things that fall on a specific Sunday, often will flip them. So, or like before Nativity, something like that. But generally, it's Saint after Ode 3, Resurrection after Ode 6. Then this is where the Synaxarion is appointed to be read. So the priest may come out and read from the Synaxarion, just like they might do at Pascha. Again, it's appointed for every Matin service to read the Synaxarion at this point after Ode 6. After Ode 8, some places might do the Catavicia after Ode 8 just to give a little bit more time. Some places don't. But this is where the Magnificat gets thrown in. The Magnificat is appointed to be sung at most Matin services, except after Lent, when we're doing the Paschal canon, there's no Magnificat. But other times, the Magnificat's appointed for almost all Matins, daily Matins, all these different things. Whatever version of the Magnificat you want to sing, the deacon comes out and announces the Magnificat, and then the choir sings it while the deacon does a full sensing of the church. So that comes after the Ode 8, and between the 8th Ode and the 9th Ode is where the Magnificat is kind of thrown in to the middle there. Then you go back to the canon for Ode 9, and then after the 9th Ode, you have another little litany. The deacon does Holy is the Lord our God, which can be sung straight by the choir. It can be sung to the tone of the first of the praises, or even the Expostularian, but the praises generally in the Procemenon melody. So if it's tone 4, you can do Holy is the Lord our God, however you want to do it, but it's in the Procemenon melody to the tone of the week or the tone of the praises, and that can be done there. So that kind of gets us through a simple canon and how it will be done in some of the variations. It's not as scary as it might seem. You just have to have the books, you have to know where everything is, and kind of have a pre-decided order that you're going to go in. With my choir, I pass out, we have refrain sheets, and on those I mark which ones we're doing that night. So I'll write 1 and 2 for the Resurrection, 3 for the Theotokos, 4 and 5 might say like, "Oh, Holy Hierarch Father Raphael, pray to God for us," or "Have mercy on us, O God, have mercy on us," for the Triodian. Whichever the refrain is, "Glory to thee, our God, glory to thee," for a feast, and then "Glory now and ever." Those are all marked, and so the choir knows exactly what to do. The reader knows exactly which ones to read, and it moves on pretty smoothly. And again, finding these earmosts, they're all on the OCA website, at least for the resurrectional services. For weekday things and feasts, it's still kind of hard to find them. And if you're going to be doing a lot of weekday matins, you just need to learn the canon melodies and be able to sing them from text like you do any other tones. And it is very doable, but very often for weekday services, we just sing the earmost straight out of the Manaean or something like that, because there's not music for all of them that have been done in English, at least. So, all right, and if you have questions on the canon, hold on to them, and we'll get to them, because now we're getting towards the end of the service itself, and then we'll have lots of time to kind of go over some questions. So after the canon, then we have the choir, or again the reader reads the Exapostolarian, or sings it for the gospel reading. Now at Resurrectional Matins, there are 11 gospel readings that are appointed, that are all the 11 resurrectional gospel readings that we just alternate through. Every week we do 1 through 11, and then every 11 weeks it goes back to the beginning. These do have tones that are appointed. Exapostolarian 1 through 8 are in those respective tones, but then 9, 10, and 11 are like tone 5, tone 6, and tone 8 or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it goes. So the tones are a little bit different for those three. But they do have tones set, so you can sing these expostularia too. Generally, the Stahira melodies are what we do. Some people may sing them to the Troparian melodies. Some expostularians are composed. It's a really good hymn. I've got some budding composers in my parish, and they say, like, what can I write? And I say, why don't you try an expostularian for this feast or something? They're good hymns to try to that can be composed, the festal ones. But the gospel readings do have expostularia. There's an expostularian and a Theotokian for each one. And then there's also the gospel Stahirian, which we'll see here in a minute, comes at the end of the praises. But so we sing the expostularian that matches the gospel reading. So I think we're with the tones right now. So I think tonight will be tone 3, will be number 3. I'm pretty sure. So sometimes that happens where it matches up the tone of the week, but sometimes it doesn't, because again, 8 tones, 11 expostularia doesn't always add up. So you do that expostularian, then you have glory, and if there's one in the Manaean, which there almost always is, even for a simple service, you would read or sing the one from the Manaean, or the Triodian or whatever, then now and ever, and typically it's going to be the Theotokian that goes with the gospel expostularian. Sometimes if it's an after feast or the Triodian, maybe it's going to be the one from there. It'll tell you if there's the Theotokian and the Triodian, use that one instead of the one from the expostularian. But if there's not, then you just go back and do the other ones again. So again, those can be read or sung. Now the problem is a lot of expostularia don't have tones in the Manaean. So if you want to sing them like we do, typically we sing them all in either tone 3 or tone 6. Generally, tone 6 is the simple one. You can just read and sing them in tone 6. Occasionally, they may be marked, and it could be tone 3, maybe tone 2, something like that. For those Manaean or festal expostularia. The festal ones sometimes have tones. So after the expostularian, we have the praises. The praises on a Saturday night are introduced just like Lord I've Cried. You sing the opening verses of the Psalms. Then the reader reads all the verses, and then you get up to however many verses you're going to do, and you kind of stop, and then you do it just like Lord I've Cried. Reader, choir, reader, choir, reader, choir. Typically there are 8 on a normal Sunday. If it's a simple service, all 8 of them come from the Artoikos. If it's a doxology or up, you might have 4 from the Artoikos and 4 from the Manaean. With the Triodian, it can be a little bit different. Generally, it's kind of like sometimes it's 5 from the Artoikos and 4 from the Triodian, which gives you 9 verses. And then or sometimes there'll be 8 and then 1, so we get 9 a lot of times with the Triodian. It just kind of varies service to service, but typically there are 8. At a weekday vigil, it's either 4 or 6 Stahira at the praises. These are usually sung to the Stahira tones, in the tone of the week, or whatever the tone is that's given. Now, of course, you can use special melodies for some of these things if they're marked. We haven't talked much about special melodies, but I do have a link or two that will give you some of those, where you can look for some. Sometimes there'll be special melodies for the praises that are already composed for you on some websites. So you go through those Stahira, with the reader, and then the glory verse can vary. It can be either the gospel Stahira, if it's a simple service. If it's a specific Sunday, again, like the Sunday for the First Ecumenical Council or the Sunday before Nativity, the glory verse may actually come from that service in the Manaean, and it would say that. If it's any other feast, like a Vigil or Polyeleos level feast, you take the glory verse, the Doxosticon, and you put it with the other verses of the praises. So instead of doing it after glory, you're just going to do it with the other verses. So you may do 3 from the service and then the glory as the 4th one, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, just ask at the end and I'll explain it better. But there is a gospel Stahira that matches the expostularian, that matches the gospel reading, that is generally done as the glory verse here. And then now and ever is a specific hymn. It comes, from the Matin service. It's that Thou art most blessed, Virgin Theotokos. It actually is the Theotokian from the tone 2 Kathisma hymns, Matins, but we sing it at almost every vigil, at least on Saturday nights. It's pretty much every vigil, except for like Palm Sunday. So that hymn is there, and typically it's sung in tone two. And it's just at the end of every praises, kind of goes in there. Then we'll do the Great Doxology, and the choir sings the full Great Doxology here. After the doxology, there are on Sundays or Saturday nights, there are 2 resurrectional tropari that are alternated each week, just 2 of them. It's not the one for the tone of the week. It's a totally different hymn. There's one for the odd number tones, 1, 3, 5, and 7. Today salvation has come to the world. And then there is one for tones 2, 4, 6, and 8, having risen from the tomb. So those 2 tropari get alternated. A lot of times people sing these in Znamanny melodies because those exist, or maybe a harmonized version of a Znamanny melody, or Byzantine chant. Maybe this is a nice place to kind of do something different. We do the harmonized one for the odd number tones and the unison Znamanny chant for the other one, just because I don't know why. But that's what we do. And St. Vladimir's does it on one of their CDs also, but we were doing it before then too. So that's kind of how those are done. But there's just the 2 of them, and they alternate. If it's a festal vigil on a weekday, you would sing the troparion for the feast, or for the saint, maybe with a dismissal theotokion too. After these troparia, the deacon and the choir do the augmented litany, and then the morning litany straight through, nothing in between them. Then the priest will come out and do the dismissal for matins, and the choir sings the polychronion, the menhirs to the bishop, unless the bishop is there, when you just sing Ispala. Now, a little note about dismissals that's controversial for a lot of people, but technically the dismissal, we don't sing Amen after the final dismissal. You go straight into the polychronion or Ispala if the bishop's there. Amen is not appointed at that point, but again, that's a practice that's going to be hard to shake in some places. But just so you know, it's actually there. Now, typically at the vigil service, this will be followed by the first hour. Again, the first hour is another place where you can shorten it. We don't do the first hour generally on Saturday nights at my church, but almost every RoCor parish would do it if you go to a RoCor vigil sometimes. So the first hour goes straight into Come Let Us Worship. You don't do the usual beginning because it's all been done. The choir could sing the Troparion and Kentuckian, but you can just read it like in the other hours. You do sing the dismissal though. The first hour has a dismissal, and then the choir would sing a victorious leader or a champion leader at the end of the service, unless it's during Lent or something like that. It's or like during Holy Week, you don't do it, those Lenten services sometimes. But if it's a normal first hour, after a normal vigil, you would sing a victorious leader to some kind of melody that's been appointed. All right, so that gets us through the outline of the service. I'm not going to go over this, but like I talked about last week, if you're interested in using bells, there are specific things that you do for bells. There's the bell with the gospel, with the hymns of ascent or the Anabathmoi. There's the Magnificat has bells also, and this kind of explains those. And this comes from a document from the Church Bell Company, which is a newer company that's teaching people how to do bell ringing. And you can go to their website and find out more information about that. But bells are kind of a musical part of the service that can be used as a call and to emphasize certain parts. Some of the links, the same links I had last week, where you can find music. The Padovan.org has a lot of music for matins. OrthodoxChurchMusic.org, which is an older site from RoCor, but it has a lot of special melodies. So if you're interested in doing special melodies, you can go and find those, and also a lot of the hymns that you would need for vigil. OrthodoxChoral.org, which is the one where you can find original Russian music. It's a newer site that is documenting all these original Russian pieces by all the different composers. There's Musica Ruska, where you can purchase lots of Russian music, and St. Deacon's new website where you can download some music for free and others you can pay for or subscribe to. Now I can't play it here, but I did want to include this because I'm on a Chromebook. It won't work for me to play it. But you can go to this link once this is sent out to see what the procession of the Polyeleos is like, because we didn't get to talk much about kind of how some of these pieces are performed at Matins. There's not a whole lot of, a lot of stuff is just tone of the week kind of things at Matins. But the Polyeleo is this one special time. And what the Polyeleo really is it's a procession. And if it's a festal service, like they're going to do magnification or something, the clergy or the bishop is serving, the clergy process out from the altar, with candles and censers and maybe carrying the icon, or all the priests have candles, and they all process out to the middle of the church. If the bishop's there, he'll take his place on the ambone, and the Polyeleo needs to be kind of performed that way. It's not a really fast piece necessarily. There are versions that can be like that are festal, but then you would like maybe do longer, more things. But you need to give this clergy this time and this kind of stately setting of the Polyeleo to kind of make it feel like it's this procession, so this is a video from Sretinsky Monastery, just recently from the meeting of the Lord. And so it's the Polyeleo and the magnification. I've got it set to go straight to the Polyeleo beginning. So you can go and watch this video on your own, and you can kind of see how that's done, what it looks like when you have a lot of clergy and they actually do a full procession out where the Polyeleo would occur. So I encourage you to go and watch that video and kind of see how it's done. It's a really, really neat part of the service when it's done that way. And then, of course, the clergy stay out generally until the anointing at a festal vigil like that. All right, so now here's my email address. It'll be there if you need it for questions, but let me get off of here, go back to the video here, and we can have plenty of time. Oh, there's a few more people who want in. Let me admit them again. And let me check the chat. All right, so there's one more new question. What's behind the no ode to? I think if you read it in the Triodian and what I've always been told, basically it's that ode to is the most serious and repentant of the odes of the canon, and it was basically decided that they were just going to be reserved for Lent. So we do ode to for the Great Canon. It pops up a couple other times because the Triodian has only 3 odes at Matins, and sometimes ode 2 is the one that's appointed. But outside of Lent, we don't have it just because of its repentant character, that it doesn't necessarily fit in with a great feast or something like that, or the resurrection, right? So we have to remember that Saturday night and Sunday morning services are festal services, right? The Sunday is called the little Pascha sometimes. And so that's kind of that idea. So I've got some other questions here. Is there an outline of the cathedral version of Matins? Not yet, but I am going to send one out when this video is sent out in a couple of days. I'll get it to Father Tom, and he will get it to you. Yes, so some more messages, and yes, this is what I'm going to announce. If you are registered for these workshops, then you will get an email in a couple of days, probably Monday, maybe for this one, that has a link to the video on YouTube and the slides. If you don't get, if you weren't registered for them, just email me and I will email you that same stuff. I can forward it to you. So if you didn't register for the other 2 and you didn't get the emails, the videos are online, but if you want the slides, you can just email me directly. Okay. So yeah, as Carol says, sorry to say, but she now understands why very few parishes do Matins. Yeah, so where do you find the canon refrains? It's in, if you have the book, The Order of Divine Services by Peter Fakula, which is a book that's published by St. John Kronstadt Press in Tennessee, that has a chart on how to do the refrains. Other than that, they are not actually in the Manan. They are listed, though, in the OCA, on the OCA website, where they have the outlines for the services for the next few weeks, where they have Vigil. They do have the refrains for those. For the great feasts, you kind of have to figure it out for what each feast. If it's a feast of the Lord, it's usually Glory to Thee, our God. If it's Feast of the Theotokos, it's just most of the Theotokos save us. If it's a saint, it depends on what kind of saint, but it might be like a holy martyr, this person praying to God for us, or a holy hierarch father, this person, or a venerable father. It kind of depends on the rank of the saint, or what kind of saint they are. Those refrains are kind of found there. I will, perhaps I can type up a list of those without copywriting the page out of the Facula book. But we are actually working on getting some of that information on the OCA website as well. So that's where the refrains would be. Which book has the Anabathmoi? It's in the Octoikos, and they may be called hymns of ascent. Yes, somebody says they Anabathmoi, or sometimes they're also called antiphons, but they come in between the epikoi and the prokimenon. If they're not there, then that means, I don't know, they should be there in between the epikoi and the prokimenon. Yes, so they're called hymns of ascent. Sometimes, it could be called antiphons. Would it be reasonable to do a cathedral vigil plus the canon? Sure, I suppose. There, like I said, I've seen lots of different versions of this. I've seen where people do Vespers, God is the Lord. Then for Matins, they do like God is the Lord, the Polyeleos, the Gospel, and the Magnificat, even. So they go past Heavy Bell of the Resurrection. Or if another option, if you want to include the canon, but maybe not all of Matins, is you could do Vespers with small Compline, and where the Compline canon would happen, you can actually do the Matins canon. That's what we do when we do a reader vigil. That's how we do that sometimes. So there's all kinds of variations, and again, it's up to your priest to kind of decide exactly what parts to do. But sure, you could try that. I will say, if you do vigil with the right kind of cuts, the right kind of choir, and the right reader, you can do vigil in 2 hours. Sometimes it takes 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2.5 hours, but if you do a simple service, you can do it 2 hours. So somebody says the St. Sergius site has them. St. Luke the Evangelist site does not have them. Interesting. So the Octoikos should have the Anabathmoi in them. So the one on the St. Sergius old Roquefort site has them, but apparently another one does not. So just be aware. Eventually, hopefully, when the OCA starts getting Matins texts done, maybe that'll be available. But there are, you can buy the Octoikos from St. John of Kronstadt Press that was done by Isaac Lamberson, is available now. And you can find them in some other places, but that's one of the main ones that's published. There's also the old Mother Mary version has them too. Okay. So does anybody else have questions? Anybody want to ask a question? You can turn your camera and your microphone on now if you want to ask a question, or you can keep putting questions in the chat. We've got time here we got plenty of time for questions now. And if you don't have a question that's just about today, if you have a question about Vigil in general, or another Vespers question or something, let's see here. Is there an outline, like a one-page outline that indicates the parts of Matins that stay the same, and then one that has movable parts? So yes, I have, like I said, I'm going to email out with this video. I will email out another outline that has, I can pull it up here real quick and I'll show it to you. If I can get to it in a fast way.
Deacon, when you're done, I have a question for you.
Go ahead. No, go right ahead.
In regards to the odes, if you were to read the odes, the biblical odes with the troparion interspersed rather than the refrains, when you get to the sixth ode and it's a shorter one, where do you normally stop? If there's the 14 total.
Okay, so you're saying, then are you saying the biblical odes, that's for weekday Matins in Lent? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
So
just
for
out of curiosity, it's just...
So for the weekday Matins in Lent, yeah, it also goes up to 14, and that's a very specific type of outline. And again, you would just have to decide how much you want to do, because you intersperse things from various places into that. I think we've talked about maybe having another session on just the Lenten services, because I actually got a lot of questions emailed last week about Lenten Vespers. And the same thing kind of might happen with Lenten Matins is its own thing. So yeah, it may require a whole other session. But that Sunday Matins, when you do those biblical canticles, they're found in the Psalter, and between each one you pull hymns from different places. But it should be set there in the Psalter to tell you which ones to do. But again, you can decide to not do all of them or do part of them. That's going to kind of be up to the priest. Or if you're doing it at home, might as well just do them all. Or if you don't have a Manan, you just leave out the Manan ones or something like that. That's we may do another session at some point on. Maybe it won't be through the OCA, but maybe I'll do one on my own if the OCA doesn't want to schedule it. But we might. We've talked about maybe having originally we were going to have a fourth one, but we kind of bumped up to Lent too far. So we'll see if we can schedule another session about Lenten Vespers and Matins. But I do, if I can find it, I may have an outline of how that works, and I can add that to the email. I'll have to check and see.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. We do have some more questions here. Let me check these real quick. Okay. What are the webinars? Yeah, I think these will. Yeah, so one question is, will these be posted on the OCA site? I think so. They are on the OCA YouTube channel for sure. Yes, you'd want to hear more about the difference between daily matins versus Sunday. So the outline I'm going to send out has, and that I can try to pull up, has all the different versions of matins on it. Let me get back to here and find it. But it has daily matins. It has daily matins with doxology, and it has also the festal vigil and the Saturday night vigil versions of matins. So I will show you what that looks like in just a second. And let me go back and look at while it's opening. Let me see what else questions we have. Have we seen parishes shorten the readings at the praises? Yes, I totally very common to sing the introduction to the praises and then just go straight to the first praises stahira. Totally a normal way of shortening that section. Yes, didn't mention that. Are there parts of matins that should always be sung? Places in which to read would not be appropriate. Yeah, I mean the non-movable parts of matins, the Polyeleos, the Glorietaria, having beheld the resurrection of Christ. Those are things that are sung. Those are always sung. The canon earmost, probably, the introduction to the praises, the doxology, those non-moving parts, you would sing, but pretty much anything else, anything from the Artoikos or the Manan almost could be read if you needed to, if you just didn't have somebody that could sing it or like that. But anything that's like from the Orologian part of matins, what we call the ordinary parts, which somebody asked about the outline. That would be parts that you'd want to sing as opposed to read. So let me see now if I can pull this up here for you and show you. And again, I will make sure that this outline gets sent out. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quick again and show you what this outline looks like. And again, they're working on getting outlines like this for matins on the OCA website. They just don't have it there yet. Okay, so it's basically a PDF. You'll see here, and it's got an outline, kind of like the one that I put in the PowerPoint, but you got daily matins there in the basic order of daily matins, not during Lent, just regular daily matins. Then daily matins, if the doxology, just the things that you change for doxology or Polyeleos service. Then you have the two different kinds of vigil. So resurrectional matins on Saturday night or festal matins at a festal vigil. They're very similar, but there are a few differences there between those services. So this outline, you will get this one too. If you need a different kind of outline, just email me and I can help create that. Or Reader Philip Ritchie at the OCA Liturgical Music, he's willing to help create outlines too. Somebody contacted us after one of the first webinars and asked for a specific outline, and he came up with it pretty quickly and was able to send it to him. So if you have questions on those kind of very specific outlines, feel free to email either one of us to try to get stuff like that created. All right, what other questions? Does anybody else have another question I want to ask out loud? Or in the chat? I was anticipating lots of questions about Matins, so yeah, I think we may do another session on Lenten Matins and Vespers, because more people are interested in doing Lenten Matins. A lot of people don't ever do it. They never get to hear the biblical canticles done and things like that. But I even had a Bishop Garasim asked me the other day. I saw him in person, but he said, "Send me everything you've got for Lenten Matins, because for clean week, so they can do it at the cathedral there." So it's becoming a little bit more popular. I know some people are starting to at least try to do it one day a week or something like that, because the Lenten Matin service is very different from Matins outside of Lent. You've got 3 Kathisma readings. You've got the biblical canticles instead of the canon in the same form. So lots of little variations that happen, and the ending is quite different too. Yes, daily Matins is appointed for every week during Lent. So every weekday. Yeah. Eldred, did you have a question? You popped up on there. Go for it.
Maybe a picky question about the troparia of each ode of the canon.
Mm-hmm.
We have 12 odes, not counting the Ermos and Caravasia. The last 2 odes, do you sing Glory Now Endeavor together before the last troparion, or do you split the Glory and the Now Endeavor?
It's always split.
Okay.
Generally, what I was always taught is that the only time you sing Glory Now and Ever together is if there are 3 of something, 3 or less, like 2 or 3. Then you would sing the first 2 and then Glory Now and Ever and the third one. But if there's 4 or more, it's split.
Okay.
Generally, that's what I've always been told. And that's how we do it. So yeah, you have Glory Now and Ever there come at the end, and they would be usually the last 2 from the Manan. However you do it, just Now and Ever is always going to be the last Theotokian in whatever canon you're reading last. The other ones can be varied a little bit. Like we may, if there are 5 troparia for a canon, and we're only going to do 4 from that one, and one of them specifically is a triadica hymn, they would call it, to the Holy Trinity. We may not do that one and do another one for the saint, just so you hear more of the hymns for the saint, at the glory instead of the one that might be appointed. But but it's always split if you've got 4 or more hymns.
Okay. Thank you, Deacon.
Sure. Who else has questions? I asked some priests what they thought people might ask about, and they all said canon. So if anybody else has more canon questions, throw them at me now while we're here, and I can kind of help you get through them. I've been doing Vigil every week for 20 years, so let me know.
Can I ask another one?
Go.
Okay, so the Exapostolarian at the end, if there's one scheduled in the Manan, do you do that with the one in the Octavos, or do you replace it?
No, yeah, you do it with it. Actually, the for the gospel readings come out of the Orologian usually. They're not in the they're not in the Octavos. It might be in an Octavos might have them listed, but that's an Orologian type text. The daily matins, when you're doing daily matins, those exapostolaria, or they're called hymns of light, they're in the Orologian, and they vary day by day.
I should have said that. Yeah, that was a question for daily matins. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, the ones that daily matins come out of the Orologian and the Lenten Matins too. They're all going to be there in the Triodian. But so yeah, you do the one for the day or for the gospel, first, then Glory, then the one from the Manan, then Now and Ever. And if it's a simple service or something like that, the Now and Ever is the one that goes with the Gospel Expostularian. But again, if it's like a great feast or something, or an after feast, then the Theotokian comes from the feast, or the Triodian, like tonight, it'll be from there, something like that. All right, more questions. Let's see. For beginners, what's the easiest way to ease into all this? The cathedral version. So it could be. Again, what we did at our church, when we wanted to start doing Vigil, we kind of eased into it by first adding Compline. And so we did Vespers and then small Compline. And then at the beginning, we did the canon for communion actually at Compline. But then we switched over to starting to do the canons for Matins at Compline. And that gets that gets people used to a little bit longer service. But that you could try this cathedral Vigil, which again helps you it gets you at least singing some of the big pieces like the Polyeleos and the Evgloitaria and stuff like that. It kind of gets those bigger pieces. If you, I recently watched the all-night vigil that they did for Nativity in Moscow, and they did all the services overnight, at midnight. And for Matins, they did like this cathedral vigil. They sang God is the Lord, they sang the Polyeleos, they sang the Magnification, and then they kind of just sang the big pieces, and then the doxology, and then they went into liturgy. So they did their whole Matins part was only like 45 minutes or something like that. So again, lots of variations that you can do. So yeah, you get the cathedral vigil again. Yeah, I'll send an outline out for that. I've only ever seen it at parishes. I've never done it before. Well, I served it at once, but I do have outlines for how it would be done. And again, this is something that they came up with at St. Vlad's, is like a shorter version of Vigil, but it does leave out the canon. So if you can find a way to add in some canon text, I think it's just good, because a lot of us still don't do Beatitude verses. It's still not very common to hear Beatitude verses on Sundays. If you do Beatitude verses, you at least get they come from the canon. So you hear some of those. Is it okay to not do Catavasias at all? It sure could be. Like I said, some people, you only do the Catavasia at the ninth ode. Yeah, you can kind of do whatever variation of Catavasia you want. Again, the common way is to do 3, 6, and 9. Again, really, it's just to help the clergy hear that it's time to do the litany if you're doing the litanies. But if you're not doing litanies, you can leave out the Catavasias even and do it more like you do at Compline. When you do a canon at Compline, there's no Catavasia, no litanies or anything like that. It's just kind of straight through. Let me see if I can just keep catching up with these here. Yeah, singing vigils for years. The cathedral is nothing like preparing for your own. That's true. When you're in charge of the vigil, it's quite different. Having to put it together. I can put together vigils really fast, but my assistants are still learning, and they takes them quite a bit longer to put together. I can put like 3 vigil books together in the time it takes other people to do one, just because I've done it thousands and plus times probably. So yes, the more you do it, the easier it'll get. How do you combine multiple canons? Is the earmost, then all the Troparia from the canons for that particular ode, then the Catavasia at the end? Yeah. So, like I said, if you look at the when you see it, when I say the presentation out, you look at that chart. You'll take the typically the canons for the let's look at tonight. So again, we're going to have the Troparia we're going to do the earmost for the resurrection, the first 2 Troparia for the resurrection, and then probably skip to either the Triodian or the Manan, just depending on the order that the priest wants. It may specify in the rubrics, but that's a little bit, you can fudge on that a little bit. Whichever one you want to do more of, you probably put last, because you get the Glory Now and Ever verse there. But then you would pull from the Manan and then do 2 or 3 from that, and then you do like 2 or 3 from the Triodian, or 4, or however. But yeah, you just combine them from the different books, from the different services, but you do them together. So you do like all the resurrection ones, then all the ones for the saint, then all the ones from the Triodian, or whatever it is that you're doing. Those are kind of the different options there. Yeah, and then Catabasia at the end of all, after now and ever, then you do the Catabasia. Carissa says you hold up fingers for your deacon. Yeah, that would be helpful, I suppose, too. Especially if the deacon's not a musician or doesn't know the order of the services or the pieces very well. If they don't know what the Catabasia sound like, or something like that, then not all deacons are choir directors. So they don't always know the different hymns. Especially we don't all go to seminary, so we don't always have that experience. So yeah, whatever you have to do to let them know, but that's a good idea. Is there a place to find Beatitude verses? Yes. So Beatitude verses at liturgy, since they are related here, they kind of go into a different, they're done a little bit different. The Beatitude verses for the Octoakos are found in the Octoakos for Sunday. They are actually, the Octoakos Beatitude verses are written for that. They are Beatitude verses only. They don't come out of the canons. So if you are looking at, if you have a daily Octoakos for the weekdays, for the liturgy day, they will have, on Saturdays at least, they have Beatitude verses. Weekday liturgies don't have Octoakos Beatitude verses because the Octoakos is a daily celebration. Those are daily liturgies. You wouldn't typically do the Beatitudes, but liturgy is a whole nother thing. But for Saturdays and Sundays, the Beatitudes for the Octoakos are found in the Octoakos itself. So you need to have access to an Octoakos, and you can have the Beatitude verses there. We sing them at my church in the Stahira tones in between the verses of the Beatitudes. So obviously people who do that, it's great because you get to hear them, but it does limit what versions of the Beatitudes you can sing. You can't sing some of the big fancy Beatitudes because you can't really stop in the middle of some of those and then read or sing a verse that's in a totally different melody. It just doesn't work. So you have to stick to a simple Beatitude setting if you're going to insert those. But the ones that come for the saint or from the Triodian or something like that, it will tell you in the book, in whatever book they come from, like the Manaean, if it's the feast of like St. John Chrysostom or St. Raphael tonight or something, it would say in the Manaean service, it will have in there Beatitude verses come from Ode 3 of the canon or Ode 6 of the canon or something like that. Now, very often it says take 4 from Ode 3 and there aren't 4 maybe. So you have to pull one from another ode that's similar. But that's how that works, is that you pull them from these different places. The Triodian would say too, it'll say Beatitude verses come from Ode 6 or something like that. So it's in there, and then you just go to that book and you find it there. So that's where those can be found. Very good. So I hope that answers your questions. Finding them online, you just have to find an online Triodian. Again, I think I have the link. If I don't have the link there to the St. Sergius website, I will put it back in because there is a website where you can go. It's in the first presentation, a link where you can go and find online versions of these. I don't know about the translations necessarily, but at least they have them and you can kind of see how it's set up. All right. St. Tikhon's streams their vigil every week, so it's interesting you can go and watch their vigil, and it's a pretty good standard vigil. They do. It's at St. Tikhon's. You can go and watch their vigils every Saturday night live, and then they end up on YouTube right after that too. So good. Other questions? We've still got some time if anybody else has any other questions.
I'm going to ask another one if I can. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Going back to combining the multiple canons, if you're doing the refrains, when you're doing the Theotokens for the first and second canon, say, is it you do the refrain for Most Holy Theotokos Savus and then wait for the Glory now and ever for the last canon? Is that correct?
Yes. Now, only unless you're doing all 14, trying to get all 14 Troparia in, you're probably not going to do those Theotokians from the other canons. The canon to the Theotokos is its own thing in the Octoakos. So in the Octoakos, you have a canon to the Resurrection that has 2 Troparia and has the Theotokian. Then there's the Cross and Resurrection, and that has the Theotokian. Then there's a canon to the Theotokos that's its own canon and that's in the Octolicos as well. So typically the way we do it is we just do the regular resurrectional ones, not the Theotokian from there, then one for the cross, then one for the Theotokos from that Theotokos canon, and then only do the Theotokian that's from the Manean at the end. But if you're doing all 14, then yeah, you would do that. You would say Most Holy Theotokos save us there, just like you would for any other one. But typically, we kind of just limit it to one Theotokian. That's actually an ending Theotokian. We don't do the ones for the smaller, the resurrection or cross and resurrection. If that answers your question. Sure. What else? Anything? Any other questions? Everybody's good? Everybody's gonna start doing Vigil now, right? You're gonna go tell your priest you're ready for Vigil. Again, it may seem kind of daunting, but when I started doing Vigil, I had been a choir director for 6 months. I was in grad school, and I'd grown up not in the Russian tradition, so I didn't know a lot of the music, and I just started doing it by myself. I was the only reader and singer for Vigil for like a year or two every week. So it's until I finally got some other singers who would start to come. So it is doable alone or with a couple people. Don't let the music scare you. There are versions of everything that can be done with one or two people. The Polyeleos and all that kind of stuff you can find. Good settings that are possible to do. And read stuff that you can read if you're not ready to sing it. There's lots of variations. If you do have more questions, again, my email address is in the original article. It's just Deacon Anthony Stokes @gmail.com. You can email me. I'll type it in the chat real quick. Just again, it'll be on the presentation. The presentation stuff will come from Father Thomas Soroka, but the video for this will be posted on the OCA YouTube channel probably within a day, and then probably on Monday we'll send the email that has the video and all the handouts for those who are registered. And again, if you want the information from the other two and you're not registered for them, just email me and I will send you the slides from the first two presentations, the videos and links to again, they are already on the OCA YouTube channel. And if you do want a Lenten webinar, email Father Thomas Soroka, tsoroka@oca.org, and just let him know that you would be interested in having another one about the Lenten services. I will say that Dr. Vladimir Morrison did do 4 webinars last year on Lenten services. Now they were mostly about music, but if you, so I don't think he went into daily Lenten Matins as much or anything like that. So, but you can go check those out. Those webinars are on the YouTube channel and on the OCA website. And you can watch those. He talks about some of the different Lenten services, talks about Holy Week, all those kinds of things. Some of the musical stuff going for those. Oh, we got one more. So you got an Octolicos from HTM. They have the tones. Yes. So that's a Byzantine thing. So the plagal tones, are tones 1 through 4, or modes 1 through 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. They call plagal 1, plagal 2, plagal 3, plagal 4. So plagal 1 is tone 5, and plagal 2 is tone 6. That's basically how that works. Yeah, the HTM Octolicos, if you have that, is set up for Byzantine chant singing. It's kind of marked in a specific way. So yeah, cover the season of Pascha too. Yeah, so there's Dr. Morrison's webinars. The OCA YouTube channel, if you just look up Orthodox Church in America, should take you to their YouTube channel when you pick up channels there. I'm not sure the address, but the links are should be linked somewhere on Facebook, maybe even. But just go to YouTube and look up Orthodox Church in America, and you'll find it. So great. If there's any other little questions, type them in. If not, we'll go ahead and end this webinar. And if you have more questions, you can just email me at any time. Have a blessed weekend of the Last Judgment and meat fair. Go enjoy some meat this weekend. Also, obviously, pray for peace in Ukraine. And most of our hierarchs have given us prayers to do at the services for that. So we'll be including those this weekend. And other than that, hopefully we'll maybe see you again for another webinar, and have a great Lent if we don't see you before then. Thank you, everyone.